really excited to have you in Berlin right now. Today the sun was shining at least, but it was like -7 degrees while I went to go get a coffee. So I hope you're warm and snuggly, and that you at least had some time today to go and stand with your face directly into the sun. So today the topic that we're going to talk about is workshop wizardry. So running successful workshops. And I'm super excited because we have not one, not two, but three people from Product People that are going to be presenting on this topic today. And we do see them as our workshop wizards and witches as well in Product People. So we're very, very excited to hear from them. Just before we jump into that, just very quickly want to introduce myself. My name is Stefan. I am a senior product management consultant at Product People, and I've been here for almost 2 years now. You can see there a little bit about my experience. I'm not really going to go into that so much. I'm from South Africa, but I've been living in Berlin since April 2023. So it's almost also nearing a year. And just a little bit about Product People. So how is it that we make money? So we are interim product managers, product leaders, and product ops. But we are on Product People's payroll. So we are full-time employed by Product People, but we offer interim product management services to other companies. We have about 42 in-house employees. And then how do we give back? Tonight is one of the things about how we do that is we have these community events where we share free talks and share knowledge generously. And we also do events, offline real events. So if you want to be a part of that in your city, let us know, hit us up. We probably will be putting up another event somewhere in Europe, in your city as well, pretty soon. And we are one of Europe's largest PM communities with over 30,000 members. So thanks for being part of that community. And then before we really jump into the topic, I think you're tired of hearing my voice. We just want to warm you up a little bit for the topic that we're going to talk about today. And we've prepared 2 questions that we want to ask you to start getting your brain into that space where our Product People trio is going to take you into. So the first question is, what are common symptoms of workshops that you've hosted or that you've attended? And the second question is, what experience do you have running workshops as a product manager? Now, if you're on Zoom, you'll see that a poll has just popped up and you can make your selection through there. If you're on any other platform, like let's say you're on Facebook or you're on LinkedIn or you're on YouTube, you can just let us know your answer in the chat. Leo is going to be looking at that and she'll also let me know what you've said there. So the options that you can choose from for the first question, what are common symptoms of workshops you have hosted or attended? The first option that you can choose is time issues. It's too long or it's too short. It's irrelevant to the attendees. The content doesn't seem to be relevant to me. I was sitting there and I'm like, why am I in this workshop? The third option is busy attendees. So there's limited availability and attention span. Lack of visible impact after. So you've sat through this 2-hour workshop maybe, and then nothing ever really came from it. And then something else, please let us know in the chat if there's something else that you think is a common symptom of a badly hosted or attended workshop. And what experience do you have running workshops as a product manager? Or if you are joining as another role, maybe you've also ran workshops. Let us know, is it none? A few, you've done 1 or 3 in 2023. Some you've done about 4 to 6 in 2023, or lots. Like if it's something you do quite regularly, you've done more than 7 workshops or ran more than 7 workshops in 2023. Please let us know. I think many times when I'm in workshops, for me, it's also a little bit of that lack of visible impact after. So we end off and we were like, okay, we just spent an hour and a half together, but I don't actually know what's going to happen here after this. We'll see those results. So that's something that I think I would have chosen there. And as a product manager at Product People, I think all of us will probably say lots of workshops in 2023. But I'm very curious to see what your answers are. Cool. So let's see. Okay. So I'm not the only one who thinks that lack of visible impact after is a bit of a symptom of a bad workshop. 46% of people on Zoom, at least, have said that this is also something that they find quite common. And then the other 46%, and then there's a 8% somewhere else, say that busy attendees, so limited availability and attention span. I think I've seen that as well a lot of times. When I'm attending a workshop or something, you can see in the video when someone's not actually listening, or they're busy answering emails, or not following along, and it might just be because maybe they shouldn't be there, or it's not engaging. And then I see a lot of you actually do quite a few workshops. There's 38% of you that have run more than 7 in 2023, and 31% of you that have done about 1 to 3. So I think a lot of us have a lot to learn during this session. I think you are happy for me to hand over to the actual speakers today. They are Staci, Juan, Pablo, and Karlo. So Staci is a senior product management consultant at Product People. I can't even remember all the experience that she has, but she's been all over the show in Europe for the last almost 2 years as well. Juan Pablo is an associate product management consultant, and he's also working with Staci on some of her missions as well, and they're working together. And then Karlo is an associate product manager consultant too at Product People as well. So I'm going to be handing over to the three of you. So I'm going to stop sharing and let you take us through your workshop wizardry.
Thank you so much, Stefan. I'm always very, very engaged every time you present. So thank you for a very warm welcome. Yeah, I don't know about most of you, but I have just finished a meeting marathon. So let's take a minute, join me with just a quick stretch, deep breath, shake it out. If you have capacity, you can stand. I'm being recorded, so I will not, but join me in a deep breath and say, my goodness, it is 5:07 or whatever time it is in your zone, and it's almost dinner time and it's almost your relaxation time. So one last thing, at least if you're in the Berlin time zone, before the evening starts. So then hopefully you can see my screen and we can dive right into the presentation we have for you today. So as you've heard Stefan mention, we have a lot of experience across a lot of different industries and companies running workshops, right? I saw that several of you have some experience, right? Either a few or some. I would say as a collective group, you saw there's about 42 of us product managers. In a year, I think I've run about 15, 20, right? And that's, of course, working with a lot of different clients, and oftentimes with the nature of work, we're brought in to really drive very specific initiatives. So what we wanted to do was share a lot of these tips, just given the sheer volume of how many onigiris we are and how many workshops we run. What are some of the most valuable tips and tricks that we've applied to our workshops to make sure that we're consistently driving value? Just want to quickly mention disclaimer, what this presentation won't be is likely comprehensive A to Z, how to prepare, how to run, and then how to wrap up a workshop. We'll definitely take you through the narrative, but we won't go through so much detail. I think there's a lot of great documentation online, and we can always do a follow-up session if you have questions about that. So we'll stick relatively high level and provide you some tips that at least help make it a successful workshop, right? So we'll go through, of course, the why. We'll walk through how to structure and design the workshop. And then my colleague, Juan Pablo, will take you through how to keep the crowd engaged. And then Karlo will take you through kind of what should happen after the workshop, right? And then we'll have time for some questions as well from your side. First of all, so why do we have workshops? Of course, we are product managers, so we are always value-driven. We're thinking about what are we bringing to the company, to the product, and to everyone who's involved with it. So if we jump into first, the definition of workshops, right? To be honest, this definition, it's not black and white. It's really just to focus our scope for our discussion today, right? So if we're thinking about workshops as a collaborative session with stakeholders, right, to achieve a certain goal. By the end of the session, we want to have gotten here, right? And I would say this is a bit different from, say, meetings, right, where it's likely just one person talking or presenting something. There might be some light discussion and maybe a decision made towards the end, but ultimately, right, a workshop has a requirement or really needs all of the participants to be actively engaged and participating for the workshop to be effective, right? So that's just the definition. And again, we would not be product managers if we didn't write a user story for it. So follow me to this Jira ticket and let's look at the user story, which is as a product manager, I want to host an engaging workshop so that I can effectively collaborate with cross-functional stakeholders and produce value for my initiatives. So very basic, but at least it keeps our eye on the ball. Now, a lot of you gave in some fantastic votes. And these are just some of the common pain points that we've experienced ourselves. We also ran a poll with a lot of our other team members, and these were really some of the top pain points that best describe when a workshop is more or less unsuccessful, right? They're either too long or too short. As Stefan mentioned, irrelevant to the point that you don't know why you are here. It could also be, instead of just why am I here, it's maybe too many people in the meeting or in the workshop, and there's just too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. Maybe there's an unclear purpose as to why we're even doing this. What are we trying to get to by the end? Definitely busy attendees. I was validated to see that many of you have experienced the same, where, you know what, I've just got so much going on for me to carve out time for this. You know what, it's taking a lot. Maybe I'm trying to do some work on the side, or maybe there was something I had to do beforehand. I didn't get a chance. Now, does that mean that I can't actively contribute, right? So these are all symptoms of busy attendees. And then lastly, as Stefan mentioned, right, the lack of visible impact afterwards. What are we doing with what we just went through? If we talk about these common pain points, I also want to touch on what is the impact of these pain points if they're not resolved. Short term, right, it's ultimately a waste of our limited resource, which is time. Right, we have how many people in a room, we're trying to grab their attention, and this is taking us away from other initiatives, right, or other tasks that we have going on. So short-term, wasted of time. Long-term, if this happens repeatedly, what we've also seen in our work is that this can really lead to stakeholder frustration, right, as to, you know what, I've done so many of these and I just don't see a point of it. And that can often mean that people are less likely to engage in future workshops. They're maybe less likely to collaborate or to give you any kind of feedback or insights that you need for things even outside of workshops, right? And this can really hamper what a product manager can do, because obviously we're not the deciders. We're often leveraging cross-functional teams and expertises to drive initiatives that we need to. So just some symptoms if we don't resolve it. Looking ahead, I'm definitely a big believer in preparation is king. I believe when you design the workshop or design anything, right, in advance, like a product, it can definitely lead to success and a smoother achievement of your goal, if you will. So let's always start with what is the goal we're trying to achieve, right? What do I want to get by the end of this session together? And I think it's also very important to say, not only is it a clearly defined goal, but also is it a realistic goal, right? Do I think by the end of this 1 hour session that we'll do OKR planning for the entire year? Probably not, right? So what is something realistic for what we can accomplish during this time? And probably also very important, communicating that goal in advance, right? And then also once you start the session, sometimes it's very helpful to reiterate that goal just so you can set the context for everyone. And then also what we found very helpful, right, is to communicate that goal at the end of the workshop just to check in. Did we hit the mark, right? And then that way they can see a lot of the continuity for what our intended purpose was and then where we ended up. Now, what do we do with the goal ultimately? The goal is very helpful to then determine backwards who should attend this. Right? If I'm trying to do user personas, right? Who do I absolutely have to have? Maybe I need my user research team. Maybe I need my designers. Do I need my developers, right? These are all questions that you should ask yourself. And then also divide that between who is a must-have and who is a nice-to-have, right? Because as we know, everyone has a very packed calendar. If, for example, my must-have attendees can't make it, and that actually blocks any kind of progress I can drive, then very likely that I'll need to reschedule that. Versus, you know what, I want to invite my CPO because they wanted visibility on it, but if they can't join, that's fine. We can catch them up afterwards, right? That doesn't actually, in some cases, mean that you have to reschedule. So that's just some helpful parameters to keep in mind. As well, thinking about the who is what kind of expertises or skills you expect them to be able to come in with, right? And I think being clear On that also helps you to eliminate overcrowding, right? Because, hey, if I need user researchers, do I need all of them? Do I need just the one who is focused on this particular scope that is relevant? These are all questions that help you to be very selective and therefore respectful of people's time. And then ultimately the how, right? Why do we want a workshop in the first place, right? Because it takes people to be time to be actively engaged. They might need to do some preparation beforehand. The question is, can I do this in another way, right? Maybe async collaboration is something that your company culture really does support well. Can we do that instead, right? Maybe I have a very urgent deadline that really necessitates that I bring everyone together for this hour. There are different reasons, and I think you should always ask yourself, is this the best format for what it is that I'm trying to do? Also keeping this task simple. The more complexity you have in what happens during the workshop, the more time it's going to take for you to explain, but also the more confusing it might be for the people who participate, right? Let's keep it simple, straightforward, so they can focus more on their input rather than what am I supposed to be doing right now? And then also thinking about what do people need to walk in the door with, right? Do I need to do some kind of pre-reading? And if I don't, because sometimes we have too busy calendars to really do the homework, does that hinder me? And the one tip that we had here was if you have pre-read, bring it into your workshop board, right? Just in case I read it 2 weeks ago or I didn't read it, at least I have a reference that helps me to at least drive some value for the workshop that I'm in. So if we've then selected the desired outcome, let's talk then about the duration of the workshop. 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, or multiple sessions. I don't know how many of you have been in 3-hour sessions. I have. Some of them have been fun and some of them have me crying, right? And there is no black and white rule, ultimately. It's all about tailoring it and customizing it to whatever purpose you have, but also the company culture, right? And so we'll walk you through, as a general guideline, what you might be thinking of when you're determining what is the final duration of my workshop. So let's start first with the 60 minutes, right? I think this is a good rule of thumb for a lot of workshops. Typically, if you have a limited scope, right? I mentioned here OSTs, user personas, lean canvas, or even like team retros. If you have a very specific scope, right? 1 hour can be really helpful. Then it's also good to give people a pre-read and context so that they can come in. You don't waste time on getting people situated and you can jump right into what is it that you're trying to do. 30 minutes, actually, I would say is really helpful in some other cases. For example, we've just finished off a big meeting together and we want to brainstorm real quick together as a follow-up to that. Keeping the context fresh in mind and having selective attendees is just about having that discussion all together, right? But I think context is super important and make sure that everyone is aligned on what you're trying to get out at the end. But 30 minutes can work if it's continuing a discussion or a workshop after a discussion. 90 minutes. I'm saying 90 minutes is my max here, just because it's my personal preference is to not go up to 2 or 3 hours. But a lot of times these longer sessions can be great for in-person, right? You have a little more time flexibility, you can casual chit chat and whatnot. Also, these sessions are very helpful when you don't have burning deadlines. Likely don't have a 90-minute session right before a big release, right? Because I can tell you right now, your teams are going to be focused on that, and taking 90 minutes out of their day is likely going to cause stress or probably lead to some declining of the RSVPs. So keep that in mind. Also, the longer you go, please, please, please build in a 5-minute break. A bio break, just something to kind of help reset you, get coffee, whatnot, really does help keep people engaged over here. And then really anything after that, you might find it helpful to do multiple sessions, right? I mentioned OKRs, right? That's probably not realistic for 1 hour, but because it is a longer planning goal, if you will, having multiple sessions would be helpful because you're trying to work off what you accomplished or discussed last time, right? Now, what's important here is obviously to keep that cadence and the distance between them to some degree so people don't forget, but also to build continuity. So if I have to have a session after 2 weeks, I'm going to remind you right beforehand of what we did 2 weeks ago, just so that it's at least fresh in your head and you can remind yourself before we jump back in. So that's kind of our breakdown of how time durations can really impact what and how successful your workshops are. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Juan Pablo, who will take you through how to keep the crowd engaged.
Thank you, Staci. Yeah, so continuing with the presentation, we are going to talk about engaging the crowd, right? So this is very important, as you all put there in your posts. This is very, very important on our workshops. And this is basically how to keep them awake, right? We, in the virtual sessions, we don't have coffee, so we need to figure out how to keep them awake in another way. So we are going to give you a few tips on this. Starting with, as clearly Staci did at the beginning of the session, is do a warm-up, right? So what is this? Basically, give a short or interactive exercise. It could be a quick group stretch. It could be how you're doing today exercise with gifts, right? Just give a mental break on the very busy schedules that all the people that are having, right? We know that all the people are coming on the workshop are very busy on other things. They have a lot of meetings, so you just want to give them a little break, mentally being here, and just want everyone to be very focused on what is coming next on the workshop. Another thing here, very important, is set the tone and present yourself as the facilitator, right? So do a quick introduction after that, and also have your responsibilities of being the facilitator. So imagine that you are the hosting of a dinner party and you want to make sure that everyone is having a good time, right? So no one is feeling left out. Everyone is having a really good time. They're talking. So imagine you as being the host of this, and you want to deal with that. And this is very important because you sometimes will deal with bias, or sometimes just one person will be talking. So it's very important for you to be very proactive on being the facilitator. You can use tools. You can use, for example, private mode or anonymous voting for if you feel that sometimes the workshop is getting a little bit biased, or preventing when someone is talking too much. You can just step in and you say, okay, let's summarize this and let's go further on the workshop. And this will be very important as well for the next slide, please, Staci, because we just want to be very clear on what the duration of each step of the workshop is. So we don't have too much time. We don't want to do, as Staci well said, 2 or 3 hours workshop. We just want to get and stick to the time, right, to the schedule. So what you can do here, first, clearly label duration time for each part of the workshop. So put, as it says there, 2 minutes. You can just go every time you go into a step. You say, guys, we have here 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10, 30 minutes, but everyone will be aligned on how much time you have to do this, and then you will need to be very careful on getting to stick into the schedule. And what also will help you a lot on this is what we call parking lot. What is parking lot? Is basically a section for off-topic ideas. So imagine you're having a discussion and your goal is to create user personas, as Staci said, and then you're talking about OKRs, but it was a very good idea. So what you can do here is you put those topics into this parking lot, and then you can just say, hey, this is a very good discussion, but let's have it after, because the goal of the workshop is XXX, right? And then what you can do is, after the workshop, you can do async messages for discussing this, or you can even schedule another link that you keep the workshop on the goal and keep the workshop on the schedule. So this will be 2 tips that have helped us a lot on our workshops, and it's very, very important in this too, for keeping into the timeline. So again, do clearly labeling on the time, adding the parking lot, and also be proactive as a facilitator when sometimes people are just talking too much and you want to stick to the goal and to the schedule of the workshop. So with that being said, I will just let in Karlo, that he'll be talking about the workshop aftercare So up to you, Karlo.
Thank you, Juan. So right after you engage the crowd, as Juan went through it, it's really important to finish on a high. So maybe you should think of doing some workshop aftercare, some due diligence with that side. So let's go through what you should do in workshop aftercare. Firstly, I would like to share with you a pretty good story of when this failed. So there was a finance team who was discussing a budget relocations on a workshop, and they failed to document and communicate findings effectively after their workshops. This, of course, led to a confusion, total disaster. So they had delays, they have repeated discussions, and let's be honest, ultimately, the workshop was unsuccessful. So why do you want to document and communicate? Well, firstly, you want to be transparent and you want to facilitate collaborations. You want to highlight the stakeholder alignments and get their buy-in to achieve that you wanted to achieve during the workshop. Of course, you want the visibility of the next steps. You want to clarify the next steps to maintain accountability. After that, you want to catch up with the absences. Some people couldn't come to a workshop. Probably they were sick or something else. You want to ensure them to not miss any important things and findings from those workshops. Of course, in the end, you want to have a future reference. You want to be able to come back to what was dealt with on this workshop, what was talked about. You want to have a resource for all participants and for their future reference. So how do you document and communicate effectively? That's a really good question. You want to summarize the takeaways and decisions. You want to briefly recap the main outcomes and decisions made during the workshop. Of course, you want to recap action items and owners. You want to list the action items, you want to assign the responsibilities, you want to note any deadlines that you discussed during the workshop. Of course, after that, you want to have the access to workshop materials for everyone. You want to provide the links, you want to provide screenshots, you want to provide the link to a workshop board that you used and for any other detailed reference. In the end, you want to share in communication channels. You want to dismantle this information through all the channels that you use in your communication. This could be Slack, Google Chat, or anything else. You want to ensure that it reaches all relevant participants. So now you heard a lot about workshops, and we would definitely like to summarize what we went through. Let's go through the tips that we shared with you. Here you will see on the left side the tips, and on the right side we'll talk more about the common workshop pain points that are solved with those tips. So firstly, we defined your desired outcome. We then went backwards from it. We emphasized the importance of starting with a clear goal in mind, planning the workshop and activities, and aligning them to desired outcomes. Here you can see that all common workshop pain points were covered. Next, we went through determining workshop duration, talked about how long the workshop should last, consider the scope and the topics of engagement in those workshops, and the level required to decide the optimal length. Of course, here we mainly solve the time issues and the busyness of attendees. Next, we covered the warm-up and setting the tone. We gave you a solution on how to begin the whole workshop, how to energize the participants, how to set the positive tone in your workshop. Here we definitely solved the problem with busy attendees because they got more engaged in those workshops that you needed to work on. Next, we of course implemented the time box and car park. So working with those gives you a focused and scheduled workshop. You can use car park to note important off-topic points for later discussions. Of course, this gives you solutions for time issues or any lack of visible impact after the workshop. And in the end, of course, we talked about the documenting and communicating. We stressed the necessity of documenting the key takeaways and decisions, sharing them in appropriate channels, and effectively communicating. This, of course, solves the unclear purpose when the attendees are busy and cannot attend or cannot facilitate in the workshop, and of course, the lack of visible impact after the workshop. So, I would definitely like for you all to scan this QR code. Feel free to scan it and subscribe to our newsletter. In some time, we'll share even more tips from other onigiris that are covered in today's presentation. So I'm going to give you a few seconds to scan it. I hope you all have fast phones, so you can scan it pretty fast. Okay. And for the end, thank you all for this opportunity to share our tips for workshops. Here you can see the presenters, us, Staci, Juan, and me, our LinkedIn codes, which you can again scan with your fast cell phones. And I'm again going to give you a few seconds to do it before we bring it back to Stefan. Okay, I hope you were fast enough. So I think we are ready to get back to Stefan.
And luckily also, Karlo, if they're not fast enough, this is going to go on YouTube. So you can always pause it there and go and connect to your favorite speakers here as well. And there will also be a link for the newsletter at the end of this presentation too. But yeah, thank you so much, Juan, Staci, Karlo. That was super cool, super high energy, really. And you've kind of wrapped it up for us at the end, telling us like what of these problems are being solved and stuff. So what's going to happen now is people are going to be asking some questions, which I honestly don't even know what more questions are. You've given such a great presentation. Thank you for that. And I hope we don't have a lot of questions going into the parking lot. But yeah, so I just want to quickly give everyone some time to think of questions that they want to ask our trio here today. And in doing that, I'm just going to spend 1 minute just wrapping up a little bit more about product people. And then hopefully then Leo would have gotten some of the questions from Facebook and from LinkedIn and from YouTube. I would have seen some of the questions coming in from Zoom, and then we can post those questions to our trio as well. So just to give you some time, a little bit more about product people. So there are typical use cases when it's best to engage with us. So it's broken down into these three. It's interim or fractional product manager or product leader, product coach or consultant, or product discovery. So the one that I think happens the most with us is the interim or fractional product manager or product leader. It's when your product manager or product leader goes on paternity, parental leave, or they leave and you need to hire someone else, or there is a brand new team that's coming up with super urgent and you just need to fill it with the product manager to get it going and to move on. So that's usually the most of our use cases. And then the clients that we've worked with so far that are more on the B2C side, here they are. I'm not going to read all of them. And I also don't want to just read 2 of them because then I'll show who my favorites are. And then here's also B2B clients, also people that companies that we've been really very fortunate and lucky to have been able to work with. And then just some of product people stats. So we have supported over 200 cross-functional teams and 70 plus of them from Series A startups to publicly listed companies. And then we have 42 product managers and product leaders in our team, like I've said in the beginning. And then a stat that we're particularly proud of is the fact that we are 62% of the team is made up of women, and 66% of the leadership is also made up of women, which is a really cool stat. And then this is our beautiful team that you can see here. We're scattered all over, I think, mostly the northern part of the world. And then we have Josh down in Cape Town as well. So there's a picture there at the bottom with a little onigiri that is with his hand in the air. That could be you if you want to apply product people and join our team. So here you can see on the left-hand side, there's a QR code for seeing what roles we currently have available that you can apply for. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a QR code that you can scan to subscribe to our newsletter and to see some of the tips that we want to share with you. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to some of the questions that we've received. So one question that we've got from YouTube is, how do you handle people that are too loud or are extremely extroverted and take over the space of everyone else during a workshop call?
I can jump in with this one. At the end of the day, being loud is not a bad thing. I think the the issue, the risk is really when other voices are not being heard, right? And ultimately, I think it's also looking at the value provided from a lot of these outputs, right? And so it depends on the workshop, to be fair. A lot of times we have, if you're using tools like Miro, FigJam, or whatnot, it's not always about who's speaking the most, right? It can also be very collaborative. Maybe we're you put 5 minutes on the clock and you're just putting in some information there, and afterwards you're doing discussion. That's oftentimes where we see some people taking over, right? And commanding and maybe not letting other people speak. I think it's always good as a facilitator, as Juan Pablo said, right? You are the host of this dinner party, saying like, that's a great point. Let me see if somebody else has a different opinion, and kind of very gently guiding them through that, or even maybe calling on someone who hasn't had the opportunity to speak and ask them for their point of view. But ultimately, I think also these tools provide you anonymous voting, right? And that's a lot of where the power of workshops come in front, is if after you've collated all the insights and you're voting and you're making decisions, or, you know, focusing on your takeaways, that's a lot of times when you have more ability to be equal, right? And it's not always about who's the loudest in the room. So hope that answered your question.
Thanks, Staci. I hope so too. I think it does. If it was me asking it, I would have answered it. Then we have two questions from two separate people from two different platforms that are kind of aligned. So I'm going to try and see how I can bring these two questions together. So we have a question from Piotr on Zoom, and then also, and sorry if I said your name very badly. And then we also have a question from Alistair on LinkedIn. Both are related to the parking lot. So the first question is, do you have some ideas on how to handle the parking lot questions after the workshops? Could you maybe share some examples, what worked and what haven't? And then the second question, maybe there's some duplication, but just hear me out. Should you aim to have time to run through the parking lot at the end of the workshop? And if not, how should they be picked up for discussion again that involves the right people?
I think I can jump in here. Great question. So thanks a lot for that. So just to clarify, right? So parking lot, again, questions that are out of the workshop. So just to answer second question, you probably don't have too much time at the end of the workshop to just go to the parking lot, right? So what you want to do is basically doing an after work. So as Karlo said, document things that are on the workshop and also do a follow-up. So after the workshop, you want to do, you want to send maybe a message, an email, or whatever works better for your stakeholders or in your company. But then just do clear messages, or what are, again, the goals of the workshop, what are the next steps, and which are the owners of that. And then you can do the parking lot. So in the same message, you say, okay, this was a very good session. We have this to discuss what we should do next. In our experience, or in my experience, what works better is you can do or schedule a second session for the other one. So you don't want to do maybe again another workshop for that, but then you can align with the stakeholders that are involved on that, and maybe invite other ones that are not involved in this workshop, because sometimes are other topics that are other people related. You can do a meeting to align on that, and then if needed, do another workshop for that specific topic. So again, to wrap up, just do just document everything, do a follow-up messages with clearly what happens on the parking lot, and then schedule a meeting specifically for that. If needed after, then do a workshop for it. In my experience, that works. I don't know, Staci, Karlo, if you have any experience of this that haven't worked from your side, but that would be my suggestion on this case.
Totally spot on, Juan Pablo. I think you definitely covered exactly how you would coordinate it, right? Especially if you were working together on a week-to-week, right? So you always schedule another session. I just want to add in from product people point of view. For example, we're oftentimes, as Stefan mentioned, we're sometimes brought in to do coaching, right? So sometimes we have like 2-day coaching, like full days, we have multiple workshops. We always build in also a little like parking lot time, like an hour at the end, where we're just fielding all of these ad hoc questions that came up. So it doesn't always fit into like if you're working full-time for a company, but for example, if you're doing like a team day where you have a lot of things together in person, then maybe something like that, which is like a nice Q&A, or just let's go through all of the pop-up discussions that came over the past few workshops. I think that's also something that's appropriate depending on the format that you're doing. So Stefan, back to you.
Amazing tag team questioning there, answering there. Thank you. A question that I have, and I'm being a little bit greedy throwing in my question because I see there's more questions coming in, but we've talked about when you have an attendee that talks a lot or that's extroverted, but sometimes what I've also seen in some of, and I think I've probably been guilty of this as well, maybe in the beginning, was you as a host can sometimes also be talking too much while doing a workshop, right? Then people would sit there and start thinking, is this a presentation or a workshop? And is there some sort of way that we can check ourselves before a workshop to make sure, am I giving enough context and giving enough guidance without making this a presentation and a Stefan or a Staci or a Juan Pablo or a Karlo show, you know, and making it a workshop? Is there something that we can use to check ourselves there?
I could talk something about this. So definitely there is a difference between a workshop and a presentation. So when you're doing workshops, you want to think in a workshop way. You want to think, okay, I need to facilitate things. I need to understand how it works. I need to get everyone's point. So I would say it's just a mindset thing. You need to have a mindset, I'm doing a workshop. So I'm not having a presentation, I'm not presenting anything. The mindset should be, I need answers from people, I need to know what are the next steps, we need some solutions for something. There is a lot of types of workshops, as we all know, they all last different times. So we should definitely try to facilitate them like this, having the mindset, okay, this is a workshop, this is not a presentation, I need answers on something, we need to solve some problems. Juan, you maybe want to jump in some more?
Absolutely agree. No, just complement that. So again, as we did on the presentation, I think it's very important before the workshop, right? So as Staci said, it's very important that, for example, you use tools, you use other things to set, okay, what is the goal, what we want to achieve? So in that case, you're not doing a presentation because if you're presenting, then how we can achieve that goal, because we want to do brainstorming, because we want to do things. So if you prepare a board and the board is saying, okay, this is the first step, we have a sticky notes here, here we do, I don't know, we are thinking about problems, then we are thinking about solutions, then we do ideation, just to put one example. Then it will be very clear for everyone that we want you to communicate, to put your thoughts there, and you give them time to do that, and you don't talk too much because it's just there and you prepare it for. So that is very good tip from my experience, to not to be talking too much. If you would know that, for example, you're a guy that always presenting and you trying to, or not trying, but you sometimes do talk too much, then prepare yourself before, prepare the board to say, okay, the time for this is 5 minutes. It will give you 5 minutes to put your thoughts, and then let's go, let's align everyone what is in there and how we can go to the next step. So that will be from my side.
Yeah, I think that timing thing that you mentioned there at the end is also pretty good, because then, you know, I only have 2 minutes to do my part of my context setting or whatever, and then it has to start going into other people talking. So that can be like a nice thing to just check yourself as well. Like, is 30 minutes of this 40-minute call spent on you talking? Thank you, Karlo and Pablo. And then we have a question from Eugene from LinkedIn. I know you've spoken previously, this is not the question yet, but I just want to prep you a little bit. I know you've spoken previously about like who to find, like who to include in your call. And I think this also just takes a step further by knowing whether you did that correctly. So the question is, how do you ensure that your workshop would fit the audience? In other words, how do you verify that your workshop is bringing value and not wasting time? So maybe someone has done all these things, but how do they then still know that it didn't waste people's time, the right people were in this call, and it did bring value?
I can take this one. I think it's a really interesting, it's complex, right, to some degree, because it's also making sure that people have an understanding of why the workshop's needed, but also afterwards, right, of being like, how good was it? So I think first and foremost, it's really, and this is one of the tips that we didn't manage to squeeze in time, but it's collecting feedback. I think especially if you're doing this workshop for the very first time at your company, it's saying, hey, you know what, this was something new for all of us. Was it helpful for you? How would you recommend we change it? It could be how you facilitate it. It could have been, hey, you know what, we should have invited this person, etc. That's usually a helpful way, just to, even someone as who's more experienced, right? It's always a good temperature check. But also if it's something very new, oftentimes I align with specific stakeholders on the team, right? Be like, okay, you know what? I'm working with this other product manager. We want to collaborate on how our teams are going to XYZ. Let me speak with them and be like, all right, this is my list of people I'm thinking to bring in. What do you think, right? And just even doing some pre-alignment of being like, who are the important voices we have, and even giving people a quick heads up before and be like, you know what, I think your expertise will really contribute, but let me know if there's another colleague of yours or someone else that might be better suited. I'm looking for XYZ kind of expertise or contribution, right? So it's giving, especially if you're like exploring new ground with workshops, or it's not clear to you in a new company, hey, people are super open to you saving their time and being respectful of kind of their expertise. So it's a great way to also make friends before you walk into a workshop full of people. So
thank you, Staci. And then I think we have time for one more question. So I am choosing. Okay, so there's a person who's asking, would you disclose to the attendees whether they are a must join for this session, like they're pretty crucial, or whether they are nice to have, like they're optional, they don't really need to be there? Would you disclose that?
I can jump in very quick here. I think we have some tools today, right? So for example, Google Calendar or other calendars that you use that you can put even they're optional or not. I think it's even better when you transparent this before. So you say, okay, we want this, as Staci mentioned on the presentation, right? So we want these people to be there. You're important to be there. If they RSVP or they decline, then reschedule, right? Because we want that people to be there. And I think it's even better to transparent that someone is optional than just being inviting everyone and then just say like, okay, that the workshop is not working correctly, right? So from my end, it will say just use the tools, use the optional part, and again, just align before, as Staci mentioned on the last question, right? So you can align who will be very interested on being there, who you can involve, who not, and also be very clear on what the goal of the workshop is, because that will be even clearer for them if they want to participate or not. And the last thing, it will be if you want to take some actions as well on the workshop. So sometimes you want to just have a 60-minute session where you have some outcomes and also take some decisions. So sometimes you will need maybe someone more C-level or someone more involved to just take the decision quicker. And that will be from my side, and I will hand it to Staci as CEO. Raise your hand.
yeah. No, just adding on top of kind of the great insights you just shared, I think ultimately there's not much risk, right, in telling people if they're required or not. It also depends on your company culture. Oftentimes I'll say, person, you know, I've added you on, just if you're interested or you can join. I think it'd be great for both you and I, but hey, if you can't join us, exactly like Karlo mentioned, we'll be documenting the takeaways, so you can always catch up afterwards. I think that often earns me some brownie points in terms of like, I just saved you some time, but brought you some valuable information, right? Versus, you know what, also saying, you know, hey, this person declined. By the way, everyone, I'm going to reschedule it because I think this person's insights are really valuable to what we're trying to achieve here. Also, a great compliment to someone of how valuable they are. So it doesn't hurt, but at the end of the day, it's just more of kind of what the dynamic is like. Back to you, Steph.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for your really thoughtful answers to all the questions that we had. I would have been stressed out to do this presentation, not because it's live and there's many people watching, but because Cheryl is also here and she's the queen of workshops and product people. So that would have stressed me out just on its own. But yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for preparing this awesome presentation for all of us and for like landing it with so much energy and passion. It was really great to see you do your thing and for also answering all our questions so beautifully. And then for everyone who attended, also thank you so much to you for watching and for coming to the Zoom call or for watching from YouTube, wherever you're watching from. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere and it's pretty cold, stay warm and drink some soup or something. I hope you enjoyed the sun if you saw it today. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, enjoy summer. Okay, and see you guys and girls and everyone else next week. Bye.